You came here to rob a dead man's kid. Go on, say it to my face. I came to letter your father's name on that wall. That's the whole job. No, you've been circling that table since you walked in. My father wasted 30 years and a fortune on junk like this. My man already graded it. A clubhouse fake. $400. And he was being kind. Then you don't need me. Tell me whose hand signed that ball and take it. You don't even have to be right. Just be brave. Name the hand in front of all these people. And you carry it out the door. I don't need to hold it.
I didn't. I tilted my head the way you read a face across a room, and I looked at the ball sitting on another man's palm. 9 seconds. I did not reach for it. I did not move. And the little laugh that was building somewhere behind me died before it got out. "That is Cotton Ostrander's hand," I said. "I would know it anywhere. The man who taught me to read it has been dead 16 years. I looked up at the young man with the grin. "And whoever told you it was a fake did not get it wrong by accident." What I did not say in that bright room full of people paid to laugh was the number. A ball Cotton Ostrander signed at a table is worth a nice dinner. This one, signed the one night his whole life came to a point, was worth more than the house I grew up in, more than everything that grinning young man was about to sell his father's life for. I thought he was handing a joke to the man who paints windows. He was handing the only man alive who could prove what his father had truly owned. And the man who had made sure he would never find out was standing right there in the room, Silver and Easy, an old friend of the family. Before this was over, that young man would have almost everything his father left him quietly taken away, and I would be the only person who could stop it. And the day I could prove it, the man who did it would not come for me. He would find the boy who waits for me after school, the one who collects people's names in a little book, and he would sign it. To understand how I knew a dead legend's hand from across a crowded room without ever picking that ball up, you have to meet the man who taught me how a real hand moves. And you have to know what it cost him to teach me. My name is Calvin Pope. I letter signs. There is a shop on a side street in Louisville with my name on the door in gold leaf I laid down myself. I paint names on windows. I letter the side of a plumber's van. I gild the numbers on a bank door, and I do the memorial boards for churches, the ones with the names of the dead in careful gold. It is quiet work. It is honest. And it lets me be home when a certain 8-year-old gets off the bus. That is the whole of what I want now. Most of the time, it is enough. Most of the time. There is a glove that hangs on a nail behind my counter. An old baseball glove, brown gone almost black, the leather soft as a sundae. It does not fit any hand in this century. It belonged to a man named Homer Vance, and Homer left it to me when he died, the way another man might leave you a watch or a name. My boy and I throw a ball into that glove most evenings after I lock up in the alley behind the shop until the light quits. He is getting an arm on him. Homer would have liked that. My boy is Bo, high as 8. He carries a notebook everywhere he goes, a cheap thing with a bent cover, and he calls it his signature book. He asks everyone to sign it. The mailman, the lady at the diner, a man at the gas pump who did not know what to make of him. He does not want their money or their story. He wants their name in their own hand, and he keeps them like some kids keep baseball cards. And at the back of that book, on his own page, he practices his own name over and over, Bo Pope, with a loop on the B the size of a fist. He is proud of that loop. His mother taught him to make it. Claire has been gone 3 years now. She taught Bo to write his name at the kitchen table, her hand over his. And I keep the first page he ever did, the letters falling downhill and half of them backward. I will tell you why a man keeps a thing like that. A name in a child's own hand is the most honest thing on earth. Nobody has taught him yet to hide inside it. Boo's letters fall downhill and double back on themselves, and he takes his time with everyone because he has nothing yet to be afraid of. That is the whole reason I do the work I used to do, and it is the reason I stopped. When you spend your life watching for the tremble a lie leaves in ink, you start to see it everywhere, in contracts, in condolence cards, in your own name on a bad day. A man can only stand to read that much fear for so long. Because a long time ago, before the shop, before Bo, I did not letter signs. I read them. I was a question document examiner. For the better part of 20 years, I sat in courtrooms and told juries whose hand wrote what, and how I knew. I learned it from Homer Vance, who had forgotten more about a human signature than most men ever learn. Homer started as a clubhouse man, a kid who kept the bats and shined the shoes, and he stood in the corners of those rooms for 50 years and watched great men sign their names. Then he spent the back half of his life telling the world which of those names were real. He taught me that you do not read a signature the way you read a word. You read it the way you read a walk or a laugh. It is a motion. It is a person caught moving. Homer had a rule about it, a short one. It was about hurry. I will give it to you whole when we get there, because it is the key to the whole thing, and I would rather you feel it than be told it. I stopped reading hands the year Claire died. There was a case before that, a bad one, where I told the truth and the truth got buried, and men I had trusted let it happen, and I walked out of that world with my name worth less than the paper I wrote it on. Then Claire got sick. Then Claire was gone. And I had a small boy who needed his father in one place, at set hours, with clean hands and a steady voice. So I bought a shop that makes letters instead of reading them, and I let the other thing go dark. And I told myself I was done. Then a woman who runs an estate service hired me to letter the name Ford Ellison on a memorial board in gold for the reception where his family would sell off the collection he spent his life building. It was early October, 6 months after Ford Ellison died. I said yes because it was a job. I did not know Ford Ellison had ever owned a baseball. I did not know his son would put it on his palm and dare me. And I did not know that the man who had told that family their treasure was garbage was the same man they trusted most in the world, or how close to home he would reach to keep it that way. Let me tell you about the ball first, because the ball is where it starts. A baseball signed by Cotton Ostrander is not a rare thing. Ostrander signed thousands. He was a kind man late in his life, and he never turned a kid away. Common as dirt, most of them, worth a nice dinner, but not the one on that young man's palm. There is a difference in the trade between a signature a man gave you at a table and a signature he gave the night his whole life came to a point. Cotton Ostrander hit the ball that ended the 1961 season into the upper deck, the last great swing of a great career. And in the clubhouse that night, still in his spikes, he signed the ball they brought him off the field. One ball. That ball. And the man standing in the corner with a camera, the clubhouse kid grown old, was Homer Vance, and Homer photographed him doing it, and Homer wrote down the date. Ford Ellison bought that ball in 1979 with Homer's authentication in his hand. He paid what a house cost then, and everyone told him he was a fool, and Ford did not care, because Ford had done the one smart thing. He had asked Homer first. Now Ford was 6 months dead, and his son was holding the ball out on his palm and calling it a $400 fake because the man the family trusted had looked them in the eye and told them so. Here is what I saw in 9 seconds. I did not need the ball in my hand because I was not reading the ball. I was reading the C. Cotton Ostrander broke the ring finger on his signing hand in a slide in his second season, and it never set right. And for the rest of his life, his capital C came with a small break in it, a hitch. A place where the pen lifted for a heartbeat before it went on. Every real Ostrander C has that hitch. Homer taught me to find it when I was younger than Bo is now. A man ceased to sign a certain way when his hand was made to sign that way by a bone that healed crooked. You cannot fake a broken bone. You can only copy the look of one, and a copy hurries, because a copy is afraid. I was 9 the first time Homer showed me the hitch. He sat me at his kitchen table with a shoebox of Ostrander balls, real and fake all mixed together, and he did not let me touch a single one. Look, he said, do not reach. He made me find the break in the sea with my eyes across the width of the table, over and over, until I could feel the difference before I could name it. He never once told me what the difference was. He made me learn it in my own hands the way you learn a face you love so that 30 years later I could stand in a rich man's parlor and know it before I knew it. The C on that ball had the hitch, and the hand around it was not afraid. It was the slowest, easiest, surest hand in the room. It was real. I did not say all of that out loud. I said it was Ostrander's hand, and that somebody had lied to them on purpose. And I watched the grin come off the young man's face and something else come up behind it. His name was Chase Ellison. He was Ford's only son. And a man near the bar, silver-haired, easy in his suit, laughed softly and said, "That is a very large accusation from a man who paints windows." I did not know his name yet. I only knew what the sea had told me, that a real thing had been called a fake by someone who knew better. And that a family was about to lose a piece of their father they did not even know they were holding. Chase sent the room home. He did not send me home. He stood over the ball with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. A young man who had spent the evening being cruel about his father and was no longer sure why. "My father's man handled this collection for 22 years, he said. "He carried the casket. You walk in off the street and tell me he is a thief." "I told you what is on the ball," I said. "I did not tell you who put the lie there. I do not know that yet. I would be lying if I said I did." He looked at me a long time. Then he said the thing that made me sure he was going to be more than a grin in a good jacket. "Then find out," he said, "and do not bring me anything you cannot prove." That was where I should have been careful. A wiser man would have gone home to his son and slept on it. But I had spent 20 years being right and being buried for it. And something in me had been waiting a long time to be right out loud. So I made a promise I did not know how to keep, and I want you to hold on to that. Because before this was done, that promise nearly cost me the only thing I have. The silver-haired man was Curtis Lund. I learned it in the parking lot from the estate woman, her voice low. Lund was not an appraiser. He was a dealer, a broker, the man collectors like Ford Ellison call when they want to buy quiet and sell quieter. He had handled Ford's purchases and Ford's sales for 22 years. When Ford died in the spring, Chase had handed him the whole collection to turn into money, the way you hand your keys to the one man left you trust. And Lund had taken the Ostrander ball away himself to have it graded before the sale and had brought it back with the bad news in his own mouth. A clubhouse fake. Some kid signed it in 1961, not cotton. Nothing to be done. $400 on a good day. He had held it alone for 11 days that summer. He was the only man besides a dead one who had. I did not know all of that the first night. I knew only what the sea told me. A real hand called a fake by a man who should have known it on sight. I drove home with the taste of it in my mouth. Bo was still up. He had waited the way he does at the window. I made him a plate. He asked me if I had gotten anybody good to sign his book, and I told him not tonight, and he told me that was okay. Some days are like that. Then he showed me his own page, a fresh row of Bo Pope, the loops getting rounder, and he asked me if his was getting better. "It is honest," I said. "That is the part that counts." He liked that. He wrote the date next to it, the way he does, so he can watch himself get better over time. He got that from me. I got it from Homer. The next morning, I started to pull the thread, and the thread pulled back. You cannot look up what a private man paid for a ball. It is not printed anywhere. But value leaves a shadow where money has to be careful. Insurance. Ford Ellison had insured his collection, and a policy has to say what a thing is worth and update it when the value changes. I asked the estate woman to find Ford's schedule and read me the line for the Ostrander ball. She called me back within the hour, and her voice had changed. "It is on here twice," she said. "Read me both." 2019. One baseball, Ostrander, described by its provenance, insured at $165,000. A pause. Paper turning. This past summer, same ball, reclassified as a display replica, insured at nothing, removed from the schedule. Who filed the change? The pause was longer this time. "The broker of record," she said. "In July, after the grading, Mr. Ellison was already gone." There it was. Not proof, but a shadow, the exact shape of the thing that cast it. In 2019, while Ford was alive and photographing his own collection, $165,000. This July, months after the old man was in the ground, after 11 days in one man's hands, nothing at all. A treasure walked down to zero on paper in a season when the only man who would have questioned it was already buried, so that when the real thing was gone, nobody would ever think to ask where it went. That was the third floor of a house I was only starting to understand I had walked into. First floor, the hand was real. Second floor, someone called it a fake on purpose. Third floor, the money had been quietly told to look away. And there was a fourth thing, and it was the one that put a clock on all of it. Ford Ellison had bought that ball with a letter of provenance in 1979, a single page in Homer's own hand, folded into the same envelope for decades. The estate woman looked for it because a real ball needs its paper. It was not in the file. It was not in the safe. It was not anywhere Ford had ever kept it. A real ball with no paper is a ball a man can call anything he likes. And a ball called worthless does not sit in a locked case for long. It goes out a side door, cheap, to a buyer nobody wrote down, and once it is gone, and no photograph in any drawer can call it back. I did not have 8 weeks. I had until someone quietly carried it away. I stood in the back of my shop with the phone still warm in my hand, and I took Homer's glove down off its nail and put my hand in it, the way I used to put my hand in his shadow when I was learning. The leather remembered a bigger hand than mine. It always has. Homer taught me the hitch in the sea at a kitchen table, but he taught me the rest of it here, in the doing, the way you learn a thing that cannot be written down. Tomorrow, I was going to stand in the way of a man who was carrying off a dead man's estate, a piece at a time. I did not know his face. I did not know how far a man like that would go. I did not know he already knew mine. Homer used to say that being right is only half a job. The other half is being believed, and the two live in different countries, and the border between them is guarded by men who do not like to be told they were wrong. I had spent a career at that border. I knew what it cost to cross. A hand I can argue about all day. A crooked man will always find another expert to squint and shrug. What I needed was the one thing Curtis Lund could not reach or buy or talk his way around. I needed to prove that this exact ball, this one, had been signed by Cotton Ostrander's living hand on that night, so its worthlessness was not an opinion, but a theft. And there was only one place in the world that knew. Homer Vance spent his last good years putting his life's work in order. Every signing he ever witnessed, every ball he ever authenticated, the photographs, the dated notes, all of it. When he died, none of it came to me. He gave it to the Merrifield Baseball Heritage Library, a small archive in a converted schoolhouse 2 states away, run by people who care about nothing on this earth except getting the record right. He gave it away, he told me once, so that no man who owned a ball could ever own its truth. The record had to sit somewhere money could not lean on it. If Homer had photographed Cotton signing that ball in 1961, the Merrifield archive would have the picture, dated, cataloged, sitting in a drawer since 2010 in a building Curtis Lund had no key to and no friend inside. That was my first link, the anchor, the thing outside his reach. I called the archive. I hit the first wall. The collection was mid-project, every image being scanned and sealed, a volunteer at a time, the originals in a locked room until the work was done. The woman on the phone was kind and firm and would not move. 8 weeks, she said, maybe more. I could file a request and wait like anyone else. The Ellison sale was in 19 days. Feel that clock, because I felt it. 19 days to prove a theft, and the one piece of proof outside the thief's reach was locked in a room I could not enter for 8 weeks. That is the kind of math that makes an honest man do a foolish thing. I did a foolish thing, but not the one you would guess, and not yet. First, I went back to the house because Chase had let me, and this time Bo was with me because the sitter had canceled and I had no one else. He waited in a chair by the door and did the thing he always does. He got the room to sign his book. The staff signed it. A buyer signed it, and a silver-haired man crouched down to my boy's level, smiled, and admired the big loop on his B, and asked him, kind as anything, to show him how he made it. I saw it happen. I thought it was nothing. A gentle man being sweet to a kid. Then I looked at the ball again, where it sat now in a locked case, and I did the thing I do best, and worst. I could not help myself. There were people there. The estate staff. 2 buyers Lund had brought through early, and Lund himself, silver and easy, watching me from across the room. And I was so sure and so tired of being quiet, and so angry, a lifetime angry, that when Chase asked me in front of all of them what I had found, I told him. All of it. The insurance line, the real hand, the 11 days. I laid my whole theory out in the open air of that room, like a fool laying his cards face up because he cannot stand to hold them anymore. That was my mistake. Hold on to it. It is coming back. Because Curtis Lund heard every word, and Curtis Lund was very, very good at his job. He did not argue with me there. He smiled sadly and let me finish, and the next morning he went to work. He did not have to reach far. My name still had a bruise on it from the bad old case, and he found it in an afternoon. By noon, he had told Chase, gently, gravely, the whole sad story. That I was a disgraced document examiner, that I had been discredited in open court once before, that men like me, washed up and bitter, prey on grieving families, talk a worthless thing into a treasure, and offer so helpfully to broker its sale for a fee. He had a folder. He always had a folder, and at the bottom of it, he laid the softest knife of all. If the ball were now found to be tampered with, well, only one outsider had been given access to it, hadn't he? A man with a grudge and a ruined name and a reason to want it in his hands. That was his first win. It was clean. By the end of the day, I was barred from the Ellison house. The ball was pulled from the sale and locked in Lund's own bonded vault, pending review, under Lund's own supervision. Chase did not accuse me, but he went quiet, and quiet from a frightened man is its own kind of verdict. I had handed Lund the exact story he needed, and I had handed it to him with both hands, in front of witnesses, because I could not stand to wait. The disgraced examiner, the grudge, the con. He had taken my oldest wound and my newest mistake and braided them into a rope, and he had used it to cut me off from the ball, the house, and the proof, all in a day. I sat in my truck outside my shop a long while before I went in, because Bo was inside doing his homework at the counter, and I did not want him to see my face until I had it back together. Chase called that night, late, after Bo was down. His voice was not the grin anymore. It was young, and it was scared, and it went up at the edges. He said Lund had shown him the court records. He said maybe I had a reason to make his father's junk worth something. He said, "How do I know you are not doing exactly what he said you would do?" I did not have a clean answer for that. A guilty man and an honest one make the same promises. I told him I could not prove I was honest. I could only prove the ball was real, and that I would need his help to do it, and that if I was lying, he would see it before I finished. There was a long quiet on the line. He did not say he believed me. He said, "Show me something I cannot argue with." Then he hung up. That was not a yes, but it was a door left open a crack, and I put my foot in it. Then I remembered the one thing Lund could not touch. I had the ball. He had the vault. He had the family and 22 years of trust in my ruined name to wave around. But he did not have the photograph. He could not walk down a hall and make the Merrifield archive forget what Homer Vance had put in a drawer in 2010. That picture was going to come out of that locked room in 8 weeks, whether Curtis Lund liked it or not. And when it did, it would show, in a dead man's own frame, Cotton Ostrander signing that ball with his living hand. 2 states away, in a schoolhouse, a dead man was getting ready to call a living one a liar. I could not get the whole collection open early. I did not need it. I needed one photograph. And one photograph is a small thing to ask of people who care about nothing but the record. I wrote to the archive again, and this time I did not ask alone. I sent them what I had, the insurance line, my own written analysis of the sea, everything. And I had Chase send, over his own signature, a formal request as the owner of the ball and the son of the man in their catalog. They said no at first. A collection mid-scan does not open for a stranger's story, but a dead master's own photograph, and the true owner's signature, and a theft with a clock on it, are a different thing than a stranger's story. The woman who wrote me back had learned the trade from a man who had learned it from Homer, and she sent one line, "I will keep the rest of my life." The record does not care who owns the ball, she wrote. It only cares that it is right. They opened the drawer for one image, dated, sealed, certified against their own catalog. Cotton Ostrander in his spikes, in 1961, signing the ball on Ford Ellison's shelf. That was link 1, existence. Sitting in a neutral drawer since 2010, beyond any man's reach. Now I needed the second link, and the second link was not in a drawer. It was in a person. Curtis Lund did not write that false grade himself. Men like him do not sign the lie. There is always a bench, always a quieter man with a certificate and a family and a lease, who does what he is told and does not ask why the paperwork is thin. When Lund took the ball to be graded, the actual work went through a small authentication shop across the river, and the man who logged it in and out was named Pete Sorrell. I found Pete Sorrell because Chase, frightened as he was, did one brave thing. He pulled the routing on his father's ball, the paperwork Lund had filed, and he read me the chain. And there, on the intake, was a name that was not Lund's own firm. A subcontractor, Sorrell. I went to see him. I did not go as an accuser. I went as one tradesman to another, and I laid it out plain, and I watched him go pale in the way a man goes pale when the thing he has been dreading finally walks in his door. He told me to leave. He had a family and a lease and one big client who could end his shop with a phone call. He had logged the ball, written the grade he was told to write, taken his fee. There was nothing here for either of us. His hands were shaking while he said it. I did not argue because all of it was true. I only asked him if he had ever heard of a man named Homer Vance. His hand stopped. Every man in that trade had heard of Homer, and I asked him what he thought Homer would have done the day a real Ostrander came across his bench with an order attached to call it a fake. He did not answer that, but he told me one thing, quiet, looking at the floor, that the sea was real, that he had known it the second he saw the hitch, and then he asked me to leave again. And this time I did, because you cannot pull a frightened man across a line all at once. You give him a night to be afraid in. He called me 2 days later. He did not sound braver. He sounded like a man who had lost an argument with himself. He said he would not testify. He said he would not put his name on anything until he had no other choice, that he had a daughter starting college, and he was not going to burn his shop down for a stranger's cause. But he had kept something, because Pete Sorrell was good, and a man who is good cannot unsee a real hand called a fake, and some scared honest part of him had been getting ready. He had kept his own intake log, the true one, the date the ball came in, the date it went out, and a line noting the order to keep it thin. He slid a copy across a diner table to me with 2 fingers like it might bite him, and he asked me to keep his name out of it as long as I could. I told him I would try. I meant it. He had kept a record of being told to keep no record, and it had cost him more to hand it over than it will ever cost me to thank him. That was link 2, time and control. The only window that ball was ever out of sight was the 11 days it sat on Pete Sorrell's bench, under Curtis Lund's written order. Not one night with me. 11 days that summer, before I ever laid eyes on it. And Pete held the third link too, because he had asked Lund once, quietly, what would happen to a real Ostrander that the world had been told was a fake, and Lund had told him not to worry about it, that it was going to a private buyer through a company he used for discreet sales, a clean name with a post office box and no front door. Pete had written that name down too, because Pete, God help him, wrote everything down, the way frightened honest men do. 3 links. The photograph that said the hand was real, the window that said only Lund controlled it, and the shell that said Lund was already moving it somewhere no one could follow. I did not have a case built on my word anymore. I had a dead man's photograph, a living man's log, and a paper trail with Lund's own instructions on it. I brought it to Chase, not to act on, to see, because he had told me not to bring him anything I could not prove, and now I could. So I laid it in front of him, and I let him decide what to do with his own father's name. He did the thing that told me he was Ford Ellison's son after all. He did not call the police first. He called a room. He called Curtis Lund to the house, and the estate's own reviewer, and me, and he sat us down in the same bright room where a young man with a grin had once put a ball on his palm and dared me to name a hand. And he laid 3 things on the table. The certified photograph from the Merrifield archive, a copy of Pete Sorrell's true log, and his father's insurance schedule, the 2 lines, $165,000 and nothing, 6 years apart. And Curtis Lund, who had won every hand so far, looked at those 3 things and did not blink, because he was good. I keep saying it, and you need to believe it, because a lesser man would make a smaller story. He picked up the photograph first. He studied it with all the time in the world. Then he set it down, and he smiled sadly at Chase, and he began gently to take it apart. "This is a lovely old picture," he said. "It is a picture of a man signing a ball. It is not a picture of this ball. Do you know how many balls Cotton Ostrander signed in his life? Thousands. This photograph proves a ball like your father's once existed. It does not prove it is the one in my vault." He turned to the reviewer, colleague to colleague. "As for the famous broken C, well, it is the single most documented thing about Ostrander's hand. It is in every price guide in the country. Any forger with a library card can copy the hitch. Frankly, its presence is exactly what I would expect on a good fake." He did not look at me. He did not have to. "I take no pleasure in this, Chase. Your father was my friend. But everything this man has shown you rests on a photograph of some other ball and the word of a subcontractor he leaned on, brought to you by an examiner the courts themselves stopped believing years ago." And the room turned. I felt it turn. The reviewer shifted his weight. Doubt is a draft under a door, and Lund had just opened one. He had taken the truest thing I had, the broken C, and turned it into evidence against me. That was his second win, and for about 4 seconds in that room, he had it. I had built the whole thing on one wall, that no one could tie the photograph to this exact ball, because one ball looks like another, and the one detail that could tie them was the very thing he had just called a forger's trick. I had forgotten who was sitting across from him, because Chase Ellison did not need me. He reached into a box at his feet and took out a folder I had never seen, and it was not mine. It was his father's. Ford Ellison did not trust anyone else to record what he loved. Once a year, he laid each piece on the same felt under the same lamp and photographed it himself for his own private file, every angle, every flaw, and Ford had noticed, decades ago, a thing no price guide ever printed because it had nothing to do with the signature. Above the C, on the sweet spot of that ball, a single seam stitch sat crooked, doubled where the factory had missed it in 1961, a tiny scar in the leather that belonged to that ball and no other on earth. Chase set his father's photograph beside the archive photograph. Same crooked stitch, same ball. Not the signature, the leather. Lund did not fold. He leaned in, patient, reasonable. "A print can be handled," he said, "retouched. I would want both images examined before I would ruin a man on a stitch." "Then examine them," Chase said, and he laid down the last thing, not prints. His father shot film to the end of his life, and he kept the negatives in numbered sleeves in a fireproof box. And Chase had brought the strip, dated in the margin by the lab that developed it in 2019. "The negative does not retouch," he said. "My father saw to that 6 years before you decided his ball was worthless." Then he looked at Curtis Lund, and he asked the only question that mattered, and he built it out of all three things at once, so there was no door left for the draft. "Tell me the name of a process," he said, "that certifies a real ball as a fake and loses the one letter that proves it real. Then tell me which of your people had it alone for 11 days this summer. And then tell me the name of the company with the post office box that you told my father's ball was going to, the one you also told me to sell through." He did not answer. That was the answer. And the door I had been dreading, the one I did not see coming, was already open somewhere else in the city. Because a man who loses the room does not stop being dangerous. He stops being careful. Curtis Lund could not reach the archive. He could not say Pete Sorrell. He could not take back a dead man's negative. So he reached for the one thing he had learned about me in all his quiet asking around, the soft place, the thing a man like me cannot lock in any vault. I went to my son. I was at my bench 2 days later, cutting a stencil, when Bo came in from the bus with his book held up over his head, lit up the way he gets when a stranger has given him a good one. "Dad, I got the best signature, the best one ever." "Yeah? Who signed it, buddy?" "A man by the bus stop. He was real nice. He knew my book. He knew I liked the loops." He put the book on my bench and turned it to the page and pressed it flat with both hands, proud. "Look." I looked. At a glance, it stopped my heart. The C had the break in it, the hitch, everything, the price guide's list. Whoever made it had done his homework. Good enough to fool a child. Good enough to fool most of the men who grade these things for money. Not good enough to fool me. I have spent my life reading hands, and a forgery cannot hide from a man who reads hands, the way a lie cannot hide from the one person who was in the room. There was a pressure in that loop Cotton never had, a faint bearing down, the tremor of a hand copying instead of remembering, pressing instead of resting. Homer gave me a rule once, a short one, and told me I would know when I had earned the whole of it. I earned it standing at that bench, over my son's open book, with a dead man's borrowed hand under his honest loops. An honest hand never hurries. That is the rule. A liar presses because a liar is afraid, and the fear is in the ink, whether he wants it there or not. It does not matter how good he is. The one thing a forger can never counterfeit is a man with nothing to hide. Cotton Ostrander, in fresh ink, in my son's book. And under it, in a small, neat hand, a line. "Ask your dad if this hand is real." The shop was very quiet, just the tick of the old window unit in the front glass. Cotton Ostrander had been dead longer than my boy had been alive, and there was only one man who knew my son carried a book, knew he loved the loops, knew which corner he waited on for the bus. A man who had crouched down at the Ellison house a week before and asked a child, kind as anything, to show him how he made his bee. He had done his studying in plain sight, in front of me, and I had called it sweet. He had put that hand in the book so I would understand two things at once, that he could counterfeit anything, even a dead legend, even to a child, and that he could reach my boy any afternoon he wanted. "He said to tell you," Bo said, watching my face, not understanding it. "He said you'd know if it was real. Is it real, Dad?" I looked at my son's hopeful face and at the dead man's hand forged under his own honest loops, and I felt a thing come up in me I had not let myself feel in a long time. Not fear. Fear I could have used. This was the other thing. The hot, quiet one. The one that wants to drive across a city in the dark. He had not threatened me in words. He was too careful for words. He had used the one language he was sure I would read without help, and he had put his mouth next to my son's ear to say it. I closed the book, slow, so my hands would not shake in front of the boy. "I want you to notice what I did and what I did not do. I did not drive to Curtis Lund. I did not put my hands on him. There is a version of this where I do, and I understand that man, and I am not better than him. But I have a boy who collects honest names because he has not yet learned that names can lie. I was not going to teach him different that afternoon. I called Chase. I told him plainly, all of it, that the man had stood close enough to my 8-year-old at a bus stop to take his book and hand it back, that he had forged a dead man's hand into it to tell me he could reach my son. And Chase Ellison, who had started all of this with a grin and a cruel dare, went quiet, and then he said 6 words I will also keep. Give me all of it. I will carry it. I did. He took the photograph and the log and the 2 insurance lines and his father's negative, and he took the page from a child's book with a dead man's forged hand in it, and he carried it, with his name and his father's name behind it, to the people whose slow, cold work I cannot do. There were no handcuffs in that bright room. There was no shouting. That is not how these things end, whatever the movies tell you. They end in filings and findings, in a broker quietly barred from the trade he spent his life in charges that move at the speed of paper, in a settlement that put the ball back where it belonged and took the cost of it out of the man who stole it. Slow, certain, the way justice actually walks. Chase called me the day it was done. Not the grin and not the scared boy from the phone either. A third voice, level, older than the other 2. He said my name, and then he said, he is finished. Barred from every auction floor in the country, for good, and the district attorney is not done with him. He told me Lund had walked out of the hearing between 2 men in plain suits and had not looked at anyone, and that the clean-named company with the post office box had a real address now, in a filing, with a real judge's name above it. I stood in my shop with the phone warm against my ear and waited to feel the thing I had wanted to feel for a year. It did not come. What came instead was quiet. The kind that settles into a room that has been loud too long. It was enough. It turned out to be more than enough. Pete Sorrell told the whole of it in the end and gave back the true log, and I will not pretend that makes him clean. But a man who keeps a record of his own wrong so that one day he can undo it is not the same as a man who tells you to keep no record at all. He was the mirror of the man who hired him. One wrote everything down. The other told him to write nothing. In the end, the difference between them was the whole case. The ball is Chase's again, real, and known to be real, back on the shelf where his father put it. He did not sell it. I do not think he ever will. There is one more thing, and it is the only part I care about, so let me slow all the way down for it. Chase asked me to come back to the house, not to appraise anything. He met me at the door himself, and Bo was with me, because it was a Saturday, and Saturdays are his. Chase crouched down to Bo's height and asked him, serious as a judge, whether he had his book. Bo did. He always does. Then Chase stood up and he did a thing I did not expect. He said that his father had spent his whole life asking one man to tell him what was real, and that the man had died, and that he would like, if I was willing, for the name on his father's authentications from now on to be mine. He asked me to sign, not as a dare, as a trust. My name, the one Curtis Lund had dug up and waved around like a shameful thing, put back to the only use it was ever good for. I told him I would think about it. I am still thinking, but I kept the paper he wrote his number on, and I have not thrown it away. Boo asked me once, in the quiet after the shop closed, why I never got mad at the man who signed his book, why I never yelled, or called the police to our door, or said one hard word out loud. It is a hard thing to answer for an 8-year-old without handing him a fear he is too young to hold, so I gave him only the small, true piece of it. A person telling the truth, I said, is never in a hurry. He waited for the rest, the way he waits for the end of a story. I did not give him the rest. Some of it he will have to earn the way I earned it, and some of it I hope to God he never has to. Then I took Bo out to the alley behind the shop in the last of the light, and I took Homer's glove down off its nail and put it on my boy's hand. Not to keep on a shelf, to use. It smelled the way it has always smelled, old leather and oil in somebody's long-gone summers, and when Bo threw, the ball popped in it the way it has popped for 60 years, a sound like a screen door closing soft in another room. He laughed. I have been chasing that laugh for 3 years, and here is the thing I have not told him, and I do not think I ever will. When he runs down to the mouth of that alley now to chase a wild throw, I am up off the step before he gets there, and I look both ways down the street before I let him past me, and I did not used to do that. I am not sure I ever will stop. That is the part of this that no settlement gave back. Later, at the counter, he opened his book to a clean page and asked me, at last, to sign it. He has been asking for a year. I never did. A man who used to swear to signatures in a courtroom gets strange about his own. I signed it. Slow, unafraid. Calvin Pope with a loop I did not use to let myself make. And then I sat and looked at my own name a while, longer than a man ought to look at his own name, because I was reading it the way Homer taught me, watching for the tremble, the hurry, the small bearing down that fear leaves in the ink, whether a man wants it there or not. For the first time in a long time, I could not find it. Boo looked at it a long time too. Then he wrote the date beside it, the way he does, so he could watch it over the years and see whether it stayed honest.